104.5 The Team, your home for New York sports and first and last 4 to 6 a.m. You hear this man right here, Mike Golic Jr. Let's get into it. We're your home for the Jets. You're a football guy above all else. Should they be starting Bryce Petty by now?
I think they should be starting Christian Hackenberg by now. By drafting him where you did, that following the Bryce Petty move earlier on in that tenure, you basically tell me that at that point you knew pretty much all you needed to know about Bryce Petty, and we can say that you're going to find things out on the field about a guy, but they see him day in and day out, and they have for a few years now, and clearly it hasn't been enough to get him on the field. Clearly it hasn't been enough to get you looking towards another future at quarterback there. So if you're going to make that move towards the future, I don't know why it wouldn't be Hackenberg in this point, unless he's so far behind that you think putting him out in the field is not only a detriment to everyone else that would be involved, but to himself as well.
Mike Golic Jr. with us. So I've been saying on the air, you don't touch Hackenberg. You almost treat him like a redshirt freshman just because how much he's been through and how off his mechanics were. But you're saying, you know what, man, throw him in the deep end and see if he can swim.
Yeah, if you are, because what else are you doing with Bryce Petty there? Maybe seeing what you have and what you think you already know about him based on those moves. Because if not, then you're just subverting that team's effort in favor of a guy who, for all of his misgivings, and Ryan Fitzpatrick has certainly earned his status in limbo with this team based off his play this year, he would still be the one that gives you the best chance to win. And when you think about the guys within that locker room, when you think about Todd Bowles, who's looking towards a future that who knows what part in that he has, that gets difficult to justify all of a sudden if you're not looking towards that immediate future there with a guy that you absolutely can think might be your guy, that you brought in to potentially be your guy. So at some point, like we see with all these young quarterbacks, the success or failure of the team dictates that you got to take the training wheels off one of these guys.
And that seems to be the most interesting part about it, is that if Todd Bowles goes to year 3, he can almost lean on Petty or Hackenberg in year 3. Is that maybe a reason we won't see these guys in 2016?
It could be, and that was a lot of what you heard with Jeff Fisher out in Los Angeles. Why did it take so long to get to Jared Goff? Was that potentially a play like that to say, all right, we didn't get to our guy till late, we still need time to develop him there? But based on the noise that you've heard around Todd Bowles, who's to say he even gets to that point? So I don't know why you wouldn't empty it now and find out what exactly you've got there, if this season really is as lost as everyone thinks it is. Because if not, then you're just going out there trying to eke out wins with a veteran quarterback there and salvage what little you can of it just for the sake of the pride of that locker room and what you owe to the other veteran players on that roster who are at the mercy of your decisions at the quarterback position here and, quite frankly, have to be wondering what the hell's going on at this point.
Co-host of First and Last, heard every weekday morning right here on 104.5 The Team, Mike Golic Jr. with us. Let's jump to the other New York team. Are the Giants actually good enough to be considered a Super Bowl contender already?
I don't know if top to bottom they're a Super Bowl contender. We've seen in the past that very average regular season Giants teams can get hot in the right way and can do it on the back and the arm of Eli Manning. So when you get to that portion of the season, when you just get yourself into the playoffs, we saw up and down last year's playoffs the names and the players that you had at the quarterback positions for all these teams. And that's a spot where having experience and having a guy who's walked the path before is so unbelievably valuable. And you couple that with maybe the best receiving trio that Eli Manning's ever had on offense to throw to, and finally a defense that they went out and spent a ton of money on. We all know that this offseason, but finally gelling and getting back to what maybe the Giants fans are more used to on defense. And ironically enough, it's starting with a guy that was there to begin with all along, who has had to alter his game, and Jason Pierre-Paul, who's coming off one of his best games of the season, the fumble recovery for the touchdown, 3 sacks in a weekend that was highlighted by defensive performances. Maybe none better than his, especially consider everything that guy has had to overcome. So he really seems to be helping lead the charge there.
This week we've discussing the possibility the NFL is exploring it of a developmental league. So you get college football, you get a developmental league, then you get the NFL. Do you think that would be good for the sport? And Mike Golic Jr., you're still fairly young. Could we see you unretiring and maybe playing in a developmental league down the line?
Listen, I think at this point putting the requisite 40 or 50 pounds back on that I need to would be pretty tough. And going into work every day and no one trying to hit me is some sort of cushy job that I've gotten a little accustomed to in the last year and change now. But I think it is a great idea, and I think going all the way back to what the NFL sort of had with that in NFL Europe, helped so many guys. It gave them that opportunity where if there wasn't room for you on the practice squad, on the team's developmental portion of the roster that existed there, you really had nothing without it once NFL Europe and the like went away. And so many guys that were able to make careers for themselves overseas and then get back and get those opportunities with teams here in the States. I know there's a ton of guys that owed their careers to that. So anything in that vein that can provide that avenue for the guys that sort of get caught in football limbo like I was for a lot of the time, I think it would be hugely beneficial. I think it would help the overall product as you have a pool of guys now, not just pulling free agents off the streets, not just taking guys that have been working out, that have been training really hard, but haven't done any real meaningful football since they've been cut from whatever camp or team they were with in the offseason. So all of it from top to bottom would serve to benefit the league in a big way. You just need to see them. There's been instances of attempts at that, but nothing the league's put its name behind, nothing the league's put its resources behind. And until they do that and fully commit to it, none of those are going to get off the ground.
Mike Golic Jr., dude, 40 pounds. That was me. I just had a good Thanksgiving. Like, that was easy to do.
Listen, it felt like my Thanksgiving, too, especially considering our household. It doesn't really shock anyone. I'm sort of on the detox tour from that now. But, yeah, a little bit of work involved to not only get the 40 back, but to make it look like an NFL offensive lineman again, which is difficult enough when I'd been putting the weight on long term. So something tells me my retirement status is going to stay pretty solidified.
All right, well, one of the things we love about you guys cover all the topics. Who's going to be the top four when the dust settles this evening?
I think you're going to be looking at Alabama at number one, the runaway favorite there, certainly. And then it's going to be some order of Clemson, Ohio State, and Washington. That's the order that I would have them in based on what we've seen from Clemson lately. And Ohio State, I know they just beat the number 3 team in the country, but they looked for most of that game to have been outplayed. And J.T. Barrett's been hot and cold for a lot of this season. A lot of that is the protection I think that he's afforded that really got exposed yet again to the tune of 8 sacks and 13 tackles for loss in this game against Michigan. And then I think Washington will round out that group there now. But it gets interesting, and we know so much is on the line with the conference championships this weekend that college football is never really a foregone conclusion. The minute we think we've got everything figured out and everyone will just hold serve, they throw us a nice curve.
Unfortunately for you, your Notre Dame Fighting Irish will not be in the top 4. They struggled this season, but really they've been making headlines off the field. What's been your reaction and some insight you can offer to this NCAA ruling about vacating wins from that 2012 season?
That one, quite frankly, to me is a bit ridiculous. Now, fundamentally for me, the idea of vacating wins has always seemed silly in whatever avenue it's come in because you can't take away what actually happened. No one from the University of Oklahoma in 2012 or Michigan State or Southern Cal that we played that year is all of a sudden going to look back and feel differently like, oh, you know what? Suddenly feels like we won that game when we woke up this morning. None of that's really going to happen, and they can't take that away from us. But the problem is for me, it's twofold. It's sort of erasing the bit of legacy that we left behind there as players, as coaches that were a part of that team and that run there in something that you trying to give back to a place that gives you so much, a place with such storied tradition like Notre Dame. You want to leave your mark in some way, and that was our chance to do that. And to have it taken away, and for this reason, is the other tough part because of the precedent sense. This is something that we haven't seen punishment-wise fitting this level of crime, and a crime that was self-reported and isolated. This is a handful of kids right here that were involved in some student-to-student cheating. She wasn't an employee of the academic services side of things. She wasn't even a direct football employee. She was a part-time student trainer here that was helping out with the team that on her own acted with these players and listen, did something wrong, and they were all punished accordingly. The problem is that Notre Dame went through the correct process, all those people on the academic side, self-reporting this issue, going through the investigation, pouring through thousands of emails. You had the football side who suspended these guys while this was all going on, when they all could have very easily just kicked these kids off the team, kicked them out of school, and be done with it. So what that yields is a process that's fair to investigating what really happened and fair to the kids because there was someone whose name was cleared in all of this and who was allowed to graduate from the University of Notre Dame. And that doesn't happen if the team and the school act in their best self-interest. But now what you've got is all of that said, all of that goes through, and you still get the NCAA levying this sort of punishment on the back end what incentive is there besides the goodness of your heart, which we know in college football is not always going to prevail, to self-report things like this when you know the NCAA getting involved just because she was a part-time employee there for the student training service, all of a sudden is going to come in and say, well, you did all that, that's great, and now we're still going to take your wins and affect your program and affect the perception of all-time wins, of the winning percentage and the things that matter to a storied place like that. So it seems wildly mishandled. I still hold out hope for the appeal, but it's been an ugly process, I think, on part of the NCAA.
Mike Golic Jr., I'll tell you this right now. I'm not the biggest Notre Dame fan, but I agree with you 100%. It seems like the NCAA has like a punishment dartboard, and they blindfold throw things at the dartboard, and it's like, all right, we're going to take this one seriously, but we're going to take this one lightly, and it doesn't make any sense.
No, it really doesn't. And what you just said there is sort of apropos of the whole situation, right? Notre Dame's a very polarizing place. There are a lot of people like you that you don't fall somewhere in the middle. You either love Notre Dame the way I do and a lot of people do, or you really don't care for Notre Dame. And it took something like the NCAA, which in and of itself is a body that comes under criticism and under fire, maybe more than anyone else, to make even the people that don't like Notre Dame look at this and say, man, even this smells funny to me, right? Like it doesn't pass the smell test from the outside looking in, and that speaks to just how poorly I think the NCAA did handle it.
I couldn't agree more. Mike Golic Jr., you're labeled by quite a few as the rising star in ESPN, the family. Where's that star end for you? What's the goal job?
Nothing really in mind at this point. Rising star is also a very loose term there. I'm just the guy that says yes at this point. I don't have the ability or the luxury and job stability to say no to anything. So if they need me to be somewhere, I just say how soon and make sure I'm in the car or on the plane, wherever I need to go. And I'm really enjoying the ride right now. It's been a hell of a run to get to be on the show with Robin in the morning every day in the week is awesome. We get a lot of free reign to cover things there and to get to fill in on a lot of shows that, quite frankly, I grew up watching, and people that from the time I was in high school and college have been the people I turned on the TV and got my sports news from. To be able to work alongside some of those people, including my dad, has been the biggest reward so far. So as long as I can keep convincing them to somehow pay me to do this along the way too, which seems ridiculous in and of itself, I'll be all good with it.
I appreciate that, but you are one of my favorites to listen to, and I love the gimmicks and the stuff you're not afraid to do. So thank you for making time for us today. We really appreciate you.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me, guys.